Hello again, you guys. We are going to go over our Chapter 5, Section 1 today. Chapter 5 covers species interactions, ecological succession, and population control, basically how communities of organisms work with one another. And in specifically Section 1, we're going to talk about how do species interact. Okay, here we go. This is the overview for Chapter 5. It emphasizes, like I said, relationships among individuals and populations within an ecosystem. Some interactions among species are going to affect the use of their resources and their population size, meaning how much food or space is available. The species composition and population size of a community, how it's built up and what type of members it has, can change in response to changing environmental conditions through a process called ecological succession. And that's in Section 2. We're not doing that just yet. And then there's always limits to population growth in nature. That's Section 3, where you can't grow indefinitely. You have to have, depending on what your resources you have, that's the best you can do. So let's see what we've got. There's a case study in this chapter about the sea otters. Sea otters are really, really interesting creatures. But at first we didn't have very many, an estimated 16, we had 16,000 on the southern seacoast. That is like off of California on the Pacific side. By 1938, there were only about 50, only 50 species left. Now, the thing about sea otters, obviously they're ocean creatures. That means their fur is waterproof. And look at this date. This is 1938. Okay, this was way before polyester was made, way before a lot of fabrics were made. If you needed a coat, you needed fur. No matter what you think about wearing fur, it doesn't matter right now. Back then, that's all they had. And otter fur is waterproof. So if you're living somewhere where it has lots of snow, rainy days, and you need a coat, an otter coat would be really, really, really warm and waterproof and amazing. So these animals were killed almost to extinction to make people coats. And like I said, in 1938, there were only about 50 of them left. In 77, we declared them an endangered species. Okay, so it took a long time. Around the 70s, if we ever get to the part where we're doing a timeline of how evolution, ecological, the green revolution times through, the 70s is when the best part of the green revolution was, when we started fixing the world. We saw things were wrong and we had the guts to go fix it. Okay, that was in the 70s. Of course, by the 80s, the big businesses knocked everything down. But the 70s were a good time for the Green Revolution. So in 1977, we declared them an endangered species, and the numbers slowly recovered so that by 2014, about the time this book was written, is book written about 2015. So about the time this book was written, we were up to 2,900. So from 50 up to 2,900, that's pretty impressive. They are a keystone species. I don't know if you remember when we talked about, or if when we go over chapter 4 and we talk about keystone species, otters are a keystone species. The thing I think he's eating there, yeah, they look like purple pincushions. They're called sea urchins. They eat sea urchins. And if they keep the sea urchin population down, that's a good thing because sea urchins eat the bottoms of algae, the roots, right around the roots of the algae. The area off the California coast has huge, huge kelp forest where it's seaweed that's growing on the bottom and gets as tall as 3 stories tall. It's like a forest underwater with all this seaweed. These urchins come along and they eat the roots of the seaweed and then it just floats away and dies. And that whole forest is gone. They would call it urchin barrens because these sea urchins, they look like little pincushions, would eat the bottoms of the algae. But otters eat sea urchins. So if we have enough otters around, they're going to keep the urchins under control and they won't tear up the forest. So that's why they call the otter a keystone species, because in just being who he is, he winds up protecting the entire ecosystem. That's what a keystone species is. And so the otters are one. And when we killed almost all of them for coats, we put ourselves in a really, really bad situation because every single animal that relies on that kelp forest, seals, seahorses, tons of fish, a lot of the animals use it for nurseries, baby nurseries and stuff. It's tons of animals. And that one otter, when we started running out of otters, We had too many urchins and it ruined the whole ecosystem. That's why they're a keystone species. So as we're thinking about this, I want you to think about these sea otters and answer these questions as we go through. There's a couple on the other slides as well. In your own words, sorry, my head is in front of the page, but you can see it. The page number that it's right there at the beginning of chapter 5. So you need to read the article to get the rest of the information. So in your own words, explain the effect of the sea otters on kelp forest and what is Est's finding, this guy who's doing the work, suggest about managing predator-prey relationships on local environments. Like I said, otter's the predator and urchins are the prey. And how do humans interact with other species, both positively and negatively? So again, read the article so you can get some information about that and answer those questions on your notes. And here's a couple of more. Otters are aquatic mammals that live, let's finish the sentence. Keystone species are important to ecosystems because, what did I just say about keystone species? And what did you remember learning in chapter 4? Next question, whether or not an animal is appealing to watch should or should not influence conservation because. Now, that's a good question. Otters are really darn cute, right? They really, really are cute and they're fun to watch playing around. So we kind of want to protect them. But what about something ugly? Like blobfish or something just not really pretty? Should we protect some of the bats are really, really ugly, but they're important with how much mosquitoes they eat. Should an animal's cuteness affect how well we protect it? And the last question, the reasons why populations in an ecosystem get large, they change by getting larger or smaller. The reasons why the populations change include, what do you think some of the reasons include? Now, we're going to cover a lot of these things in chapter, but what do you think right now? Okay, so let's go on to the thing. In section 1, these 4 points up here, these are our main ideas that we're going to cover in section 1. First, we're going to explain how the species compete. Competition is going to be a big issue in this lesson. Compete with one another for resources. We're going to recognize feeding relationships, okay, herbivore, omnivore, carnivore, as a major category of interactions, meaning what they eat makes a big deal about how they interact with other species. Obviously, if it's lunch, I'm coming at you with claws and fangs, right? So we need to understand how interactions between predator and prey species can drive each other's evolution. Now that's really, really interesting. How can the way a predator evolves in its environment affect the way the prey evolves in its? That's going to be really interesting to talk about. We'll get to that in just a minute. And then we need to differentiate, this is something that probably a lot of you already know, between parasitism, mutualism, and commensalism. Now, commensalism might be the only one that we have any trouble with, but most everybody knows what parasites are, and they understand the meaning of mutual. So these are the main things that we're going to cover in this chapter. So let's get going. First, what are 5 ways that the species interact? So the first way is interspecific and intraspecific competition. Look at the words. They look almost like exactly the same words. Inter and intra. Intra and interspecific. One is animals of the same species arguing with one another, and the other is animals of different species. Okay. Then predation, meaning the predators, parasitism, mutualism, commensalism. So these 5 things are ways that species interact. And all of these interactions are going to affect resource use and population size, meaning how we use our resources and how many of us there are around, or any of this, whatever species we're talking about. Now, species have to share limited resources for food, shelter, and space. The world is not unlimited. There are limits to what we have and what we have available. So we have to fight for it, compete for it, especially the animals. Okay. So the types of competition, these are the ones I was talking about, intra and inter. Intra and inter. Intraspecific, that's from the word for species. Intraspecific is competition within a single species. Intra, inside. Inter, okay, means competition of different species. Intra, inter. And so interspecific is also going to involve one species becoming more efficient than others at the resources, or when two species compete for the same and their niches overlap. So we're going to talk a lot about what happens with interspecific competition. Intraspecific means base usually it's the same animal fighting for mates. Almost 100% of the time they're fighting for mates if it's with fighting within the same species. Not always, but like really close to 100%. All right, so resource partitioning. Do you see the word partitioning? Means part. You see the word part right there? Means breaking a habitat or a niche or a resources up into parts so that everybody can share. So competing species, now these are not the same species, these are different species. They evolve specialized traits that allow them to use shared resources at different times in different ways or in different places. I have a very good picture right here. It's called spreading the wealth. All right, so this is sharing the wealth. Partition, there's a lot more information on page 133, but they're all warblers, but they're different species of warblers. So they're related to one another, but they're not the same species. Okay, they're very closely related, but they don't interbreed, they're not the same species. But if you look, the different birds are going to eat from different portions of the tree. All right, these highlights show where these guys are eating from, and because of this, they can share the same tree. Resource partitioning, okay? Like spread the wealth. So resource partitioning among these 5 species of insect-eating warblers in the spruce forests in Maine is where they're from. That each one spends at least half of its feeding time in that associated highlighted area. And so they share. Okay, they didn't do it on purpose. They evolved that way. It's not like they had a big meeting or anything. You guys get this batch and we'll take this batch. But it worked out that way through slow evolution through the thing. So first question, again, you're going to answer these questions in your notes. How would the partitioning of feeding areas in the tree benefit these birds? What do you think? Well, they wouldn't have to fight so hard, would they? Okay, and what might happen if all the warbler species ate from anywhere in the tree? Yeah, there wouldn't be enough to go around, would there? All right, so now we're talking the next interaction. So we talked about interspecific and intra. Intra is the same. Inter is between different species. Okay, now we're going to talk about predator-prey. Okay, this is the one we always watch when we're watching like Discovery Channel shows or any kind of animal, ecology shows. There's always something eating something else. So predator-prey. Predation is what you call it. It's an individual of one species. The predator is feeding directly on all or part of the living organism as part of the food web. And the prey is the species that's hunted. And the predator-prey relationships are going to have really, really strong effects on population size and other factors. The predator keeps the prey population in check. If there's a whole bunch of examples, and I have great videos that I'm going to try to show you of what happens if because the predator animals, the predator are usually bigger animals and they're scary to us. So if we're going to kill off anything, we're going to kill off the wolves or the sharks, okay, because they're scary, they're predators. But that means then their prey is free to reproduce and take over, and nothing's going to keep them in check, and they're going to wind up eating up their whole environment. I have a lot of examples of where that happens. One of the best we watched, the wolves, when they took all the wolves out of the Yellowstone Park, that let the deer and the elk populations get too big. They hunted all the wolves out of Yellowstone Park, and the deer populations overshot and they overgrazed everything to the point where they thought there was something wrong with the aspens and the willow. They thought there was something wrong with the grass or whatever. But what it was is that the deer were just sitting there eating everything up. Now, once they reintroduced the wolves back to the society, the wolves kept the deer moving, and so they weren't allowed to graze in any one area for a very long time, and those areas started to recover. Okay, so the predator species help keep the prey species in check, and therefore the whole ecosystem stays healthier. Okay, so it's a big, big deal as far as how these ecologies work. So the carnivores are going to have a variety of method of capturing their prey. We probably kind of know this already, right? They're either going to run or fly. They may work together to hunt. They may ambush. That means hide and then go attack. Camouflage is another thing, and chemical weapons. Both, we're going to talk about how they affect each other. Like camouflage, the hunters will use camouflage to hide so that they can pounce on the prey, and the prey will use camouflage to hide from the predators. So they're both going to use camouflage, and they both may be using chemical weapons. The predator may use chemical weapons to kill and maim and hold the prey. The prey animal may use chemical weapons to deter the predator, like a skunk. That's a chemical weapon. All right, so both would be using these, but this particular slide is talking about how the predators use it. And again, this is how the preys are going to avoid predation: run, swim, or fly fast. They usually have a highly developed sight, hearing, and smell. They may have physical protection like shells or spines. Camouflage in shapes or color to help to, like I told you, they both use camouflage to help hide. And then chemical defenses like poison, irritation, sting, foul smelling, or bad tasting. They could be poisonous. And then warning coloration. I've got a picture on this next slide. I'm going to show you about all of these. And then behavior, they can avoid predators by different behaviors like mimicry or grouping together, like grouping together like the wildebeests and the zebras and the giraffes do. They group together in big herds so that the lions have a harder time getting them. So let me show you this next slide. All right, guys, here's some examples of those defenses that the animals will sometimes use against their predators. Right here, we have this one here, the spanworm and this wandering leaf. You can see those guys are using camouflage, right? Where this spanworm is looking like this stick and this wandering leaf is looking like a leaf, right? If you look at this one down here, C and D and E, these three guys are using toxic chemicals. Do you see this bombardier beetle? He sprays off poisons to keep away his predators. The monarchs, as beautiful as monarchs are, they taste horrible. All right, so if a cat or a lizard or something is going to try to eat a monarch, he'll only eat one, okay, because they are nasty. And the poison dart frog is so poisonous that the native people of the Amazon, where this frog lives, will actually use this poison dart frog. They'll catch one and rub their spears or their arrows on the back of a frog, all right, on its back, so that they can poison the arrows, and then they go hunting, and so they've got poison on their arrows. All right, so these three guys are using toxic chemicals to help fight their predators. This one here, look at this viceroy butterfly. You see how he looks kind of like the monarch right here? All right, he's using mimicry. Okay, that's what you call it, where he's trying to mimic. Okay, if you were a lizard and you caught and ate this viceroy butterfly, it would be yummy. It would be absolutely yummy. However, if in your life you've already had a monarch one time, you're going to stay the heck away from this guy because of how much he looks like this. Monarchs, like I said, taste awful. All right. And so this viceroy is trying to protect himself by looking like a monarch. Now, look at this here. The moth, these two guys are having deceptive looks right here and deceptive behavior. This is a moth. Now, when moths, you see the big eye spots on his back wings? When moths are asleep, let me see which way my hands. Okay. When moths are asleep, they lay on the side of the tree and they fold their wings up like this. All right. If something startles them, they're going to flick the wings out like this and then take off. Okay. However, now if you were a snake or a cat or something sneaking up on this moth, and all of a sudden when he flips his wings out like this and you see these two big eye spots, it's kind of startling. Now, he may not completely fool the cat, but it's just enough of a stop reflex to give him time to get away, and that's all he needs. He doesn't need to completely fool the cat. He just needs to give himself a second, and that shock of seeing those great big eyeballs all of a sudden gives him just the quick time to get away. This is a caterpillar that when you bother him, he's going to take his tail and make it shaped like this. That looks like a snake coming out of that tree. And it does on purpose. That's his tail. I think it's his tail. Oh. Yeah, it looks like the head of a snake, but I believe that's his tail he's using. All right, and so if you were a bird or something coming after that and you saw and the caterpillar notices, he's going to make himself look like a snake, and the bird is not going to want to mess with that. Okay, so these are all different ways that the animals can protect themselves from predators. All right, let's go to the next slide. If I can figure out how to make things go. Well, let me do it the hard way. Hold on. All right, so as these predators and prey are interacting with one another, they can actually drive each other's evolution. All right, this complex predator-prey relationships play a role in natural selection. So the predators are going to catch the sick or weak or aged or less fit individuals first. So if you don't fit in your environment, you're going to get eaten by the predators. The prey that's more able to survive is going to live and pass on their traits to the offspring. So what they're actually wind up doing is you wind up having this thing called coevolution right here. Co meaning both of them at the same time. Okay, coevolution is when populations of two different species are going to interact over a long period of time. Changing the gene pool of one species can lead to changes in the gene pool of the other. Now, let's have a little story that helps us learn this one. So, imagine there's this area where there's soft shell crabs. Okay, there's like an island that these soft shell crabs live on the island. Well, let's say a hurricane blows a predator bird over. Okay, and the predator bird with the soft shell crabs, because there's genetic diversity in the environment. Some shells are soft, some shells are medium, and some shells are hard. It's just like when we have people. Some people are short, some people are medium, some people are tall. It's just variations within the genetics. And so with these soft shell crabs, some of them have different densities of shell. It doesn't matter too much until this predator bird comes hunting in their area, and the predator bird can catch and eat the soft shell crabs a lot easier. If he picks up one with a harder shell, he's going to drop it down and he's going to go finding a softer shell. And so over time, the ones with the more dense shells are the ones who survive, and they wind up having more babies. And so the babies will also have denser shells. And so the bird is going to have less and less to eat until the bird may have naturally evolved a stronger beak, more musculature, just like we have some people who are born who are built like football players, and some people who are built like baseball players. Okay, it just has to do with how you're built. Well, some of these birds may have a stronger set of jaws. So as the crabs are the only ones with the denser shells are the ones who are surviving, then the birds who naturally have stronger beak get to eat more often because they're the ones who can break through the shell. And if that's the case, those are the birds who are going to be healthier when it's time to hatch eggs. Their eggs and their babies will be healthier because the mother was better fed. And therefore, then, still with these dense shelled crabs, of whoever of these with dense shells is a little bit more denser shells and a little bit more denser shells, okay, are going to survive. And then the birds who are naturally have stronger beaks are going to eat. So over time, what was a bird that has a pretty small beak and crabs that had really soft shells, over time, they both change one another as they are going through their generations after generations. They are evolving in response to one another. You can have the same things with toxicity. If you have like clownfish, like Nemo, lives in anemones, and in the anemones are going to put poison out. Those little, what I'm talking about, the corals, anemones. So the clownfish have developed tolerance to the sting of the anemones. Okay, and so that develops over time as these species co-evolve, and it can be predator prey, but it doesn't have to be. There's flowers that there's a bird called a honey creeper who has a really, really long beak, and this particular orchid, who he's developed a long trumpet-shaped flower that only this honey creeper can get in to get the pollen and the nectar. Because if they are exclusive feeders, then he knows the pollen is up here. He's going to hit the pollen on top of the bird's head as the bird goes down to get the nectar. Okay, so then when the plant knows when this bird goes to his next plant, he's going to pick another one of this same type of orchid because he's guaranteed food because nobody else can get to the nectar that deep in there. Only the honey creepers can. And so the orchid knows that his pollen is not going to get wasted. It's mostly likely that this honey creeper is going to go to another of the same kind of orchid. And therefore, all the energy that he made to make this pollen isn't going to be wasted. And again, that's coevolution. Two animals developing in response to one another, two completely different species. All right, let's go to the. All right, this section of our notes is talking about relationships of one species to another, parasitism, mutualism, and commensalism. How do they react with one another? You guys know what parasites are. This occurs when one species, the parasite, lives on or in another one, the host, and benefits at the host's expense. Parasites usually weaken the host but rarely kill them. Now that's something to think about. They'll weaken the host but not really kill them, because if that parasite is feeding off, say, a dog or something, well, that has a size. It's not just because of size. The idea is that if you kill your host entirely, you're out of food. Usually what the parasite will do is just weaken the host so the host can't fight them off, but not kill them completely so that the parasite is still guaranteed food. It's a pretty smart trick, it's pretty evil. All right, they may live inside the host like tapeworms. They may attach to the outside like mistletoe on a tree. Yes, the mistletoe for Christmas, that's a parasite. Sea lampreys are also, they attach to the outside. And they may move from host to host to host. All right, so those are all the different possibilities of parasitism. And you know a bunch about parasitism yourself, and there's more in the book because you've learned about this in the past. Let me get to the next slide, which is mutualism. Mutualism. And mutualism is where both species benefit. You know, like you've heard for mutual benefit, everybody gets something good out of the deal. It's like providing each other with food or shelter, protection, or some other resource. Like I was talking about the honey creepers who are feeding on this one orchid. That's a mutualistic relationship. The honey creepers are guaranteed food in this one particular orchid, and this one particular orchid is guaranteed that the honey creeper is going to go to the same type of orchid to drop off the pollen. The examples, some more examples are like when the birds are riding on the back of large animals, like water buffalo or elephants or even, they'll just ride right on the back and they'll feed on pests like ticks or animals. And so the birds get a meal and the big animals get rid of pests. This is a mutual benefit. Bacteria. Now this is kind of weird. We have a lot of bacteria. You guys have heard probiotics. Okay, we have a lot of bacteria that live in our intestines. They live there, they're there on purpose. They get food and shelter. They actually help us digest food. They create enzymes that our body needs, and they handle a lot of some of the hormone interactions. They are really, really important. Not necessarily hormones, but definitely enzyme interactions. And so without them, humans are, that we get sick. That's why they have people taking probiotics all the time. They help to resupply that bacteria that live naturally within our gut. That is a mutualistic relationship. Now, there are some bacteria that don't belong in there. That's when you get sick or have a tummy ache or, Montezuma's revenge or whatever you call it in your house. You know that there are bad bacteria as well, but for the most part, there are a lot more good bacteria. And if you have enough of the good bacteria, the bad bacteria doesn't have a place to get resources. So the better you have of the good bacteria, the less a hold the bad bacteria can get. It looks like it's cooperation, but not. Each one is actually getting something out of the deal. They're all in it for themselves. It looks like they decided to be best buddies and alliances and make a team or whatever, but they're actually just getting what they need. It just turns out to be best for both. All right, and the next slide. All right, on this slide, we have a little bit of diversion. This is a National Geographic on assignment. We'll take a look at this critter, okay? It's a moray eel, okay? Moray eels may look like snake, but they're actually fish. They can get anywhere from 15 centimeters to 4 feet, 4 meters, which is anywhere from 6 inches to 13 feet long. This is a honeycomb moray eel, and it's the second largest species. It can get up to 70 inches long. The moray eels actually have 2 sets of jaws inside their mouth The first set is located inside and it's used to capture the prey. The second one is way back in their throat. And these extend into the mouth to help grab and pull food down the throat because they pretty much swallow it whole. But looking at this picture, and again, you may want to look at the bigger one in your book on page 136. But at first glance, what animal did you think it was showing you? Okay, it looks to me like a leopard or a cheetah. All right, before you read the caption, what did you think was going to happen to this shrimp? Okay, that helped you predict that fate. What words would you describe the paragraph? So I think if you look, I'm just going by memory. What is that shrimp doing? Read the caption. Because I think the shrimp's acting like a dentist. I don't think he's food. I think he's actually cleaning the dude's teeth. All right. There's a lot of birds that do that for crocodiles. Okay. The crocodile, if he's not hungry, now if he's hungry, the bird's not going to go out. The crocodiles will sit there with their mouth open like this, letting the sun kind of hit down on their throat like this when they're cold. It helps them warm up. But they have their teeth like this, and the birds will come if they know for sure the alligator's not hungry, pick the food out of his teeth. And when you get food stuck in your teeth, it hurts so bad. Well, it hurts the alligators too. And the birds will come pick it out of his teeth. And so the bird's getting a free meal. The alligator's getting his teeth cleaned, which I believe that's what's happening with this moray eel. Check your caption, check your article to see what it says. But if that's the case, if this shrimp is cleaning his teeth, what do you call that? Is it parasitism? Is it predator-prey relationship? Is it mutualism? What do you call that if he's actually helping that guy? Mutualism, right? Because shrimp's getting the food and moray's getting his teeth cleaned. Pretty cool, huh? That is a mutualistic relationship. Now, commensalism, this is another one. Have you guys ever seen these plants here? This is called a bromeliad. Let me read that. Let me get started in the right order. Okay, so commensalism is the third one. So we had parasitism, we had mutualism, and now we have commensalism. Commensalism, have you ever heard anybody say commence, meaning go on or begin or go ahead? Commence, go on. Commensalism is where one species benefits, but the interaction has little beneficial or harmful effect on the other ones. It doesn't have any effect, very little effect at all on the other ones. So if you imagine you have a tree, let me see. Here's a tree with the branches. Okay, my arm is a tree. Get in front of the camera. All right, and say a bird makes his nest right here in the branch of a tree. Well, the bird's getting a nest, is getting a place to live. The tree get anything out of it? No, he was going to have his branch sticking out like this anyway. He was just going to have his branch sticking out, and the bird decided to put a nest there. Okay, so the tree's not getting anything out of the bargain, but the bird certainly is. That's commensalism, where one is getting benefit and the other couldn't care less. Okay, and so commence means like go on or whatever. And this is what's happening with this air plant down here. It's an epiphyte, a type of bromeliad, and you've seen those probably at Home Depot. They have them a lot of the times. But they are going to attach themselves just like a bird's nest. They're going to attach themselves to a tree right here. Now, they're not pulling nutrients out of the tree. They're just sitting there trying to catch rain and sunshine. Now, mistletoe, on the other hand, remember I told you mistletoe was a parasite, right? On a tree, mistletoe will actually attach itself here and it starts pulling nutrients out of the tree and weakens it, almost kills it. Now, that's definitely a parasite. But these bromeliads, they just live here. They don't do anything to the tree. They don't hurt the tree. Tree couldn't care less if they were there. The tree was going to have a branch. This is where I wanted my branch to be. You can stay here if you want or go. I don't care. Okay, that's commensalism. Okay. Now again, what was the one that I said was a parasite? Mistletoe, like at Christmas, because they're going to actually pull nutrients out of the tree and kill the tree. Okay. So this one is commensalism, where they don't care. So we've had parasitism, mutualism, commensalism. All right, now let's go on to the next slide, the last slide. We are almost done with our lesson already. The last slide is some quick check core ideas. Now, these core ideas, every one of these questions is false. Okay, whenever you see these up here, check your instructions because I have these on your study guides and I have them on your other stuff. They're already false. So am I asking you to tell me if they're true or false? No, because I told you right here, they are false. We know this already. What I'm asking you to do is fix this underlined word. so that they will be true. All right, so let's look at the first one. Interspecific competition involves one species becoming more efficient than others in obtaining resources. That's almost a giveaway, right? Because these two words were so similar. If this is one of them and we know it's false, it's got to be the other one. So it would be the correct answer. Interspecific competition involves one species becoming more efficient than others at obtaining the resources. So interspecific is two different species. Intra is the same species. This next one, it says predation is a selection process which changes in the gene pool of one species leads to changes in the gene pool of another. Which one did we say when they evolve in response to one another? They evolve together, okay, together, like cooperate, coevolution. That's what that one is. Coevolution is the process where the changes in one gene pool is going to lead to changes in the other. And this last one, mutualism, is when one species benefits from the interaction with another, but it has no beneficial or harmful on the other. And that's the wrong one. Mutualism said it was good for everybody. What's the one that's good for one, but the other couldn't care less? Commensalism. Right. I think you guys got this. I'll see you all the next time. All right, rewind and watch anything that was kind of confusing, okay? Make sure you get your notes all done, filled in all those questions. I'll see you the next time, okay? Bye, you guys.